All right, so Dan Roberts, whose X bio reads
What's
independent, Twitter,
Okay.
X, they're interchangeable. But his X Twitter bio reads independent senior sports analyst and insider. He tweets out that UCLA quarterback Dante Moore is expected to transfer to Michigan. This tweet has over 77,000 views, JP.
I mean, you're going to lead me to a tweet by a guy who's got 254 followers? Are we saying that's legit?
Might
Because
be.
on the flip side, my guy Andrew Smith, who has at least 534 followers and is on the Ohio State beat for 11 Warriors, says that he's heard from multiple sources around the country that Ohio State is very much a contender to land the former five-star recruit Dante Moore. It's a conflicting reports.
Someone's going to be happy and someone's going to be sad. Dante Moore will be rich.
Yeah, some of these quarterbacks are going to have plenty of money to deal with. But this is Red Corner, Blue Corner right here on Stadium. That's Jake Butt, Michigan Wolverine, All-American, tight end, Mackey Award winner, all of the things. Really great guy, too.
And this is Ohio State captain and national champion Joshua Perry.
All right, and we got a lot to talk about here. We started off with the Dante Moore tweets. He's one of the hot transfer quarterbacks in the portal. I think one of the things that's attractive about him is he's got a little bit of leeway in terms of how long he can play, a ton of eligibility as a young guy. Ohio State and Michigan looking to kind of renew their battle in the portal, this time going after him. He threw for over 1,600 yards and 11 touchdowns with 9 interceptions for the Bruins. Certainly looked like a young guy a lot of times. He's a Michigan kid, UCLA and Michigan. Oregon and Michigan in the mix before he chose UCLA. If you had to pick a school that would probably have the edge here to win this battle, Ohio State or Michigan, which is it?
So there's a few things working here. One is that we know for a fact Ohio State's quarterback room is wide open. You know, so assuming pretty much whoever transfers in as a quarterback from the big name tier 1 names, most likely Ohio State has looked them in the eyes and said, this is your battle to lose. So that's working. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy's decision is just quite yet. I will say, because of the Michigan ties, and we'll talk about some more options for Ohio State later, that what makes more sense to me, you mentioned he wanted to go to Michigan early in his recruiting before deciding to go to UCLA. It seems to me like there is a hunch that he may go back home to join his hometown team, the Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, I would say that the ability to sell to him that he would be the guy who would get the development that he wanted. And he put out when he announced he was in the portal that one of the things he was looking for was development. Well, if I'm Ohio State, I can say to you, listen, brother, you're going to get all the development because we're pushing our chips in on you. We want you to be our guy right now. And so we're going to develop the hell out of you this spring and this training camp and this summer to make sure that you can play. And I think that's attractive. You mentioned his ties to the state of Michigan. I think if I'm Michigan, I am leaning all the way into that.
Yeah.
Come back home, regardless of what J.J. McCarthy said. You told us in your announcement that the biggest thing for you is that development. Maybe you do take a year of JJ's back, and you can learn from a guy who's potentially going to be a first-round pick. I mean, just outside of coaching, there is nothing better than being around a leader who understands the college football playoff, who understands how to beat his rival, who understands how to win Big Ten championships, and I think that's a big selling point there. I think Ohio State and Michigan both also need to lean into the rivalry aspect of this. Of course, as a Michigan kid, Michigan's had the upper hand. I think that works for them. Before Ohio State, you could be like, listen, dude, we haven't had a quarterback who really grew up around this rivalry in a long time, and you can be the guy that brings us back to prominence because you can make an argument that they were one quarterback away from being able to actually win on the road last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll take a look at, take a pulse of the Michigan fan base here in a second, but I do have to think about this and say Ohio State has a better track record to say and sell, we develop college quarterbacks better than Michigan does, right? That's a fair statement. But I think Coach Harbaugh's selling point is we haven't had the talent like you, Dante Moore. JJ was our only guy with that level of talent, and look what we've done with him. Look at what I've done with talented quarterbacks in the past. Andrew Luck, Kaepernick, some of the Alex Smith in the NFL. Harbaugh knows that his system allows guys to excel. So we can take a pulse of the Michigan fan base and look at what James Michael tweeted out, which is just this. Dante Moore has gifts. He looked absolutely talented, but extremely raw. And he said Michigan is a perfect system for him. And that's kind of my point I just made there leads me to this, to say, I do think Michigan is a very stable team where they have consistently good offensive line. They do have a talented running game. I think for a young quarterback that's developing, that's one of the best benefits is you can lean on that and then get into play action. Obviously, J.J. McCarthy has benefited significantly from play action, to help his own development, JP.
Yeah, I mean, system-wise, I think that you make great points about Michigan, and certainly when they have the run game going and they have a talented quarterback, it becomes a much better spot. When I start to look at what Ohio State can offer, I'm like, hey, look at this wide receiver room and all the talent you get to throw the football to. Look at the guys that we have put in the NFL. And, hey, if you feel like you don't necessarily fit the mold of what C.J. Stroud was, well, Justin Fields was a little bit of a different guy, and he got it done.
Yeah.
Dwayne Haskins was a little bit of a different guy, and he got it done. So I do think that there are a lot of really good pitches either one of these schools can make. And both of these coaches are also known for their development with quarterbacks. So I think that he's going to have a tough choice there. Now, we had some Ohio State fan reaction as well, and AD tweets out, I would love to see Ohio State make a push for more. I love this play in the Under Armour game playing with Ennis and Tate. Ennis and Tate are two of the freshman wide receivers on the Ohio State roster, Brandon Ennis, Carnell Tate. And that's a part of what I think Ohio State can really sell is we've got young, great receiver talent that we can bring up with you, and y'all can be stars.
The truth is he looked great in the Under Armour game, right, with those two guys, but not so great at UCLA, right? It wasn't a perfect year. He looked like a young quarterback this year. Playing at this level is different. So as we talk about the quarterback transfer portal, maybe it's Dante Moore for Ohio State, maybe it's someone else, but one thing we do know is Ohio State is in the market for a quarterback after Kyle McCord announced yesterday, this is how this all got started, that he is entering the transfer portal. Now, McCord is one of 12 Buckeyes to enter the transfer portal, including a former 5-star wide receiver, Julian Fleming. So, JP, as our resident Buckeye, I got to ask you, what is going on in Columbus right now? Is it time to panic?
I don't think there's a lot of panic. I know people are looking at Kyle McCord, and of course this puts the Ohio State quarterback room in a bind. And the reports that are coming out said that McCord and his family met with Ryan Day and asked about what the future looked like and if there were any assurances that he would be the starting guy moving forward. And Ryan Day looked at him and said, I think that we have an obligation to have a quarterback competition here within our program. And Kyle McCord said, I don't have that much time left to play, and I led you guys to an 11-1 regular season record. I think I just got to go somewhere else. And so they have to hit on the next quarterback. I think that's pretty apparent. Now, I start going through the rest of the list, and I know you mentioned Julian Fleming, who's a 5-star guy who hasn't had the career that he wanted in Columbus. Has been banged up for part of it. Also has bricks for hands, and I think that really matters when we're talking about wide receivers. I don't know if that's as big of a loss. But you start going through the list, Amari Abor, you haven't heard of him. Cam Martinez was the guy who fell down in coverage against Georgia, essentially lost that game. Vic Cutler, guy who transferred in this past year and won the backup center job. He's back out. Evan Pryor has been banged up for a lot of his career. Ryan Turner, haven't seen him a ton. Kicker Parker Lewis and Jair Brown, Kai Stokes were two guys that had promise but got jumped on the depth chart. And as we mentioned, Kyle, you got Jacoby James and Reed Carrico, and it's a list of guys who haven't necessarily played a ton, and some of them have been in the program for multiple years. So I could see why they would want to go somewhere where they feel like they can play. The other thing is you start looking at the history, and a couple years ago, Ohio State had 19 guys transfer out. Last year they had 9 guys. They're at 12 right now. I don't know if this is necessarily like anything crazy right now.
Yeah, and maybe it's an addition by subtraction thing, right? So
it's a little bit of both.
The number grabs your attention, right?
And they have to replace the guys, right? Like if your dudes are leaving out, and maybe even if you encourage some of these guys to go out, you better have the replacements ready to go.
Yeah. Well, Dante Moore's a hot name. Let's go to our comments. Nolan had something to say about it, and he said, hey, is anyone worried about a guy who committed to Oregon, decommitted, and then goes to UCLA, and then goes back to the portal after one season? I think this is a fair conversation. JP, we've talked about this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he had a complicated recruitment, and I think that young people right now are a little bit more antsy when it comes to moving around, and that would be a concern for me because you could categorize him as a flight risk. I think that's why when you recruit guys in the portal, it is important to try to get to know them as best as possible. The hard part is that you don't have the time to get to know them all that well.
Right. Now, this isn't this scenario, but I do think it kind of applies to this. You know, like if you date like 10 girls in high school and you say, well, you know what, they're all the problem. It's all on the 10 girls. You're the common denominator, right? At some point, you got to say, I got to work on myself. That's what I feel like is going on a little bit with the transfer portal. And again, I'm not saying, but when Dante Moore has committed and decommitted and flirted with a number of different schools throughout his recruitment, at some point for him, dude's clearly talented. He's got to make the decision himself to say, okay, I'm going to make this next decision. Maybe it's Ohio State. Maybe it's Michigan. Maybe whoever it is, I'm going to make the internal commitment that I'm going to find my own ceiling and my own potential. And I'm going to work every single offseason to realize my full potential, right? The perfect place doesn't exist. The perfect place is the school you choose to make work.
I'm with you. Like, I think part of destiny is creating your own destiny at times, right? And guys are looking for things that they haven't put the similar amount of effort into getting, and it just doesn't work like that. So it'll be interesting to watch. But we talked about J.J. McCarthy and what his prospects are, potentially stay at Michigan. He could go to the NFL. I think you and I both agree that another year would help him improve his draft stock. He could show off some different things. But if he left right now, he'd certainly be a highly drafted quarterback. But let's say JJ's gone, and we already know Kyle McCord is gone. Who is the heir apparent for Michigan and for Ohio State?
So from what I understand, going to camp and being around the program, and we saw it a little bit in the Ohio State game, Coach Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, loves Alex Orji. He thinks he is extremely, extremely talented. At one point, he had him as like he was on the depth chart as a kick returner this year, as a quarterback, right? The dude is extremely talented and gifted. The question is his development as a quarterback. You know, those things have to overlap at some point. So I know they like him. He's a name. Dante Moore, I think, is the other name. I think it's between those three, between JJ, between Orji, and between potentially Dante Moore.
Can Orji throw the football?
That's the question, right? Well, here's the thing. I know he can throw it. Boy, does it look good leaving his hand. I mean, he's got all the arm talent, but can he throw it where it needs to be?
That's kind of what I'm getting
within the
at.
Scheme. That's the question.
And I know it was more package based what they did with him this year. And when you're playing with the lead the way that Michigan was, you don't want to have to throw the football if you don't need to. But we never really got to see that part of him. So I think that'll be the big question there. As for Ohio State, couldn't tell you. I know they like Lincoln Kienholz. He's a true freshman this year. I think he's a very talented player. He's a multi-sport athlete. Still very young. He's probably raw. Got to develop. So this will be a fun one to watch. Maybe get the veteran out of the portal.
Yeah, maybe it's Cam Ward. I don't know. This is what makes football great. It's a soap opera year round. We'll keep you guys covered.
Reality
I promise
TV.
You that. But still to come, we will also keep you covered when we continue our Big Ten fantasy draft. There's some big names still on the board, and that's next right here on Red Corner, Blue Corner. All right, welcome back. It is that season where awards are being dropped. The Broyles Award, which goes to the nation's top assistant, was just announced, and it is going to Iowa's defensive coordinator, Phil Parker. JP, what do you think?
Well, first off, I'd like to commend one of the other finalists there, Sharon Moore, and what he did stepping in for Jim Harbaugh this year. I think that he had a very strong case for that. All of that said, Phil Parker is the right answer. The margins were so narrow for Iowa to be able to win football games, and they won 10 of them off the strength of that defense alone. They have the worst offense in college football, statistically. The worst offense. Won 10 games. He deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, look, both really were deserving.
Yeah.
Someone was going to be upset.
Yep.
What Phil Parker has done, he's never won this award, which I think is
wild.
Part of that had to be factored in there. He deserved to win it.
Yep.
He got it done. Sharon certainly deserved to win it as well, but only one winner, and I'm okay with it.
Sharon can go get a
to
national title, and Phil Parker can't.
And they'll take that one even more, right? Okay, as promised, we're going to continue our red corner, blue corner, Big Ten draft, and we'll take a look at yesterday's recap. So we did our picks 1 through 5. I kicked it off picking J.J. McCarthy. I went with back-to-back running backs there, Corum, Henderson, and then I went defense, Jerzon Newton and Cooper DeJean. JP got the best offensive line in the conference in Michigan.
Well, let me tell you what I got.
Go ahead. What do you got?
I got the best offensive line. I got the best weapon. I got the best pass rusher. I got the best corner, and I got the second best corner.
I think I got the best pass rusher in Johnny Newton, to be completely honest with you.
Nah.
I think I got the best pass rusher.
Interior rusher.
And he might be the best pass rusher overall.
We'll see.
Okay, so we're going with our draft.
That Michigan offensive line, though, what he's going to do.
Why don't you kick it off, because it's your 6th pick right now.
All right, well, I'm going to take the best linebacker in the conference as well. I got Abdul Carter there from Penn State. Listen, man, he played phenomenally. And the total tackles number doesn't look crazy. It's because it was a well-rounded defense. You look at the sack numbers, forced fumbles, the interceptions there. What he did in coverage at times, being able to close off the middle of the field and some of the cover 2 concepts, being able to run. I mean, he's so versatile. I love it.
He's a freak, and he's wearing the number 11, which goes to the freaks at Penn State. You know, it'll come up because I got a Penn State guy coming in my next 2 picks on the defense. Their stats are skewed because they literally they blew out every team on their schedule and didn't play in the second half. So all good. With my 7th pick, though, I went with Emeka Egbuka, the receiver from Ohio State. And I get it. He dealt with injuries this year. It wasn't as explosive of a year as I think a lot of us might have helped. Still at his best is a first-round talent. Still is the 2nd best receiver in the conference. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr., JP, you got him and kind of forced my hand. And then with my 8th pick, I went with Penn State's 2nd best edge rusher, though I do think it was close at times, Adisa Isaac. Another guy that was extremely disruptive off the edge. You see 7.5 sacks this season. That's a lot of production, So, you know, the good thing is for Manny Diaz is they created a lot of one-on-one matchups in the defensive line.
Just getting ready to say
you got to win your one-on-one matchup. 7.5 sacks gets it done.
He did a great job when he had the one-on-ones of winning. I think that's what Abdul did from the linebacker position as well. So to your point, like they did a great job with scheme. I'm going to have to find a way, and you're going to have to find a way to scheme these guys up.
That's right.
For sure. Now, with the 9th pick, I got Colston Loveland, who I believe is the best tight end in the Big Ten Conference. He is a really good receiver of the football. You can use him in line and run routes from there. You can split him out, run routes from there. I don't think he is a phenomenal blocker. I don't know how many tight ends that can catch the football nowadays are, but one thing he does is he gives really good effort when he is blocking, and I think you can coach the rest of it. He's a guy that I'm really looking forward to as the future comes. And then I'm going back on the defensive side of the ball, and I've got Chris Jenkins with the 10th pick here. And I think that there is something to be said about having a big body on the defensive line. A lot of the D tackles right now are more disruptors that can move really well. I'd like to have an anchor that can also move really well,
right.
And that's what I got with him.
They call him the mutant.
Yeah.
Enough said, right? Okay, so again, I'm filling out my defensive line. We forced each other's hands.
We did.
As names started coming off the board, we had to make a pick. So I stuck with the interior, and I stayed with the other side of Illinois' interior defensive line. I went with Big Keith Randolph. It's Newton and Randolph. They call themselves the law firm. Extremely productive, can move really, really well. That's what I liked about both these guys. Very similar to Chris Jenkins. And then to complete my defensive line, so my 2 interior Illinois, my 2 edge are set, and to complete my edge rush, I went with JTT, the edge rusher from Ohio State. JP.
Yeah, I think he's a really talented player, a lot of upside there. Was inconsistent, I think, is probably the biggest
Disappointing,
thing.
Right?
Does a great job in the run game, though. For me, I've got, with the 13th pick, Tyler Nubin, the safety from Minnesota. And the thing for me is what he does hawking the football. I want a guy in the back end that's really intelligent, a guy that can move on all three levels of the defense, which he played at. They would move him down to linebacker level. They put him on the blitz. Love the fact that he could do that. He could take the ball away. And then my last one is another guy who I have in the secondary at the safety spot, and that's Dylan Thieneman, the freshman phenom out of Purdue. Look at the tackle number right there. Look at the interception number right there.
Kid's
Look at the
really
forced
impressive
fumbles
now,
number.
man.
This was as a freshman.
Yep.
Understand, man. And he erases problems in the middle of the field, too. The way he can come from depth and clean up tackles, that's the guy for me in the back end.
Let's put up all of our day's picks. My last pick of the day was Jay Higgins, the linebacker for Iowa, who I love the way. Led the Big Ten in tackles. But here's how we wind down our day's picks right here. You can see the team starting to form out. Again, we're gonna fill this out throughout the rest of the week. We'll put out our final rosters and let you guys decide. JP, how do you feel about your team?
Dog, I am cooking, bro.
I feel like I'm cooking right now. I don't think you got a chance.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I think I really do.
Good thing you're not a GM, because you can't draft. I'll tell you that much. But hey, still to come. Michigan fans, I don't know how fired up they are to see Alabama in the CFP, but how does the Crimson Tide feel? We'll get AJ McCarron's thoughts, and we're joined by our rivals down south coming up. Well, it sounded like a bunch of moans and groans to me, and then people realized that they were on camera, so they said, oh, man, maybe we should clap so we don't sound scared. But time to bring in our rivals down south. We got SEC Mike joining us and A.J. McCarron, who we got to see. Bengals got a big victory on Monday night there, so congratulations. But AJ, I want to throw it over to you real quick. We've talked a lot about what the sentiment is up here in the Midwest about this matchup, but how are Crimson Tide fans feeling about having to face Michigan in the playoff?
Well, I mean, you got to feel good. Hell, you got to feel good just off that reaction in that video, and that's coming from the team itself, right? Like, I wish we could go back and watch the clip. Just watch the guy in the center if we're able to play that clip again. He has a hoodie on. He throws his hood up as soon as he sees Alabama. He's right there, right past the guy filming the bald head. Look, there goes the hood. I mean, absolutely terrified. If that's a golf clap if I've ever seen it, it's like, shit, I don't know if we really want to do that. But listen, I think that video says a lot, really and truly.
Yeah, SEC Mike, I want to flip it over to you, man, because you've got the pulse on everything going down there. You know how all the fans are talking online on the message boards and everything else. What are some of the fans saying right now about this?
Yeah, they're ready to skip over the Rose Bowl, just completely look ahead. Michigan, they're wondering about getting to Houston. Who are we gonna play? Texas? Let's rematch Texas. I don't even think they're given a consideration that it could be Washington. They want Texas, Sarkisian rematch for that early season defeat. That's all I'm hearing. What's Alabama gonna be favored by Texas when they meet here on January 8th in Houston?
Wow. All right, so Jake, I want to throw it back over to you now because you got to hear these two guys talk. We also replayed that video, and you saw, homeboy throwing his hood up there. It didn't seem like he was ready to be a competitor. What is your response to all of this?
I say good that you guys think that, good that they think that, SEC Mike, and like, you know what, that dude, don't come on the bus, bro. We can't count on you anyways. You should hit the portal. Everyone's doing it. Don't come on the bus. I see no fear in these guys' eyes. Like, they're ready for this moment.
I saw no fear.
They're the #1 team in the country. I didn't see Blake Corum react like that or JJ react like that. There's no fear in these guys anyways. So I say bring it on.
All right, time for Rivals Down South. We're with our red corner, blue corner guys talking college football rankings. AJ, we never really got your thought. You were off yesterday. Did they get it? And we already know what you're going to say. I mean, I don't even know why we're spending time. Did Alabama deserve it? AJ, what do you got on that?
Well, listen, and I feel like coming from a player, all right, somebody that's played a very long time, I understand the argument for Florida State, right? I do, because that's part of the game, is playing through injuries. Everybody on this, on this panel, especially red corner, blue corner, knows what it takes, right? Like, each week is a challenge. It's never a guarantee. I don't care how good you think your team is. It's never a guarantee that you're just going to roll your helmet out there and win, right? So props to Florida State for being able to find a way to win those last two games, without Jordan Travis and then without Rodemaker in the ACC championship game. But can you sit there and watch that team that struggled that bad offensively, thrown for 55 yards in a conference championship game, and say they are way better, than the Alabama team? You just can't say that, right? And that's the committee's job, is to pick the 4 best teams. It's not, always the most deserving 4 teams, but the 4 best teams. And yes, I think they got it right. Like, if you put Texas in there, and I think Bama goes in right behind it for Texas to jump Florida State as well.
Yeah, we're already seeing it with the bowl matchup, Georgia-Florida State. I don't know if you guys seen the line, but Georgia's a 2-touchdown favorite. I mean, my goodness, what would it have been if it was Michigan-Florida State? It would have been an unwatchable football game, and that's due to injury. I get it, so maybe that's not fair, but and we're seeing the reaction here from Michigan. I mean, if we're talking I get it. They get the 4 best argument. That's kind of, they always change the narrative however they can to fit whatever the four they pick. But there's no way anyone can convince me that they didn't get two great matchups. And it would not have been two great matchups with Florida State without a quarterback. What do you guys on the red corner, blue corner think of that?
Listen, I've been around and around on this, and I don't think that the committee process is perfect. I'm not here to defend the committee's consistency or any of that, but I am here to say that they made the right decision. If there is one thing that I do know, things that I saw this year, is I saw Michigan, I saw Washington, I saw Texas, and I saw Alabama beat teams that are playoff caliber. I look up and down Florida State's roster all year long. Maybe LSU should have been just a little bit better, right? Maybe Louisville should have been just a little bit better, right? Like these are the things that I'm looking at here to see, can they beat a team of that caliber? And I had not seen that from them because they didn't have the opportunity. But what I did see was the teams that got in did. And so I think that's why they deserve to be in there.
Yeah, SEC, Mike, like there's two separate conversations where, like, do I agree with what the committee did with their four versus like that's a conversation over here versus what the actual matchups are. I mean, this is maybe the most competitive Final Four we've had since this whole thing started. I mean, you're talking massive matchups and an expectation of a competitive massive matchup for the national title as well. I mean, whether I like it or not, or whether I agree with the committee or not, I have to acknowledge the fact that the way this is set up right now is set up for like historical numbers.
Right.
You know,
go ahead, AJ.
Yeah, Mike, I tell you what's interesting about these matchups is I think for Alabama, from a matchup standpoint, they got the best draw that they possibly could going against Michigan. And the reason I say that is because Michigan you don't face a quarterback that can run like Jalen in the Big Ten. There's not one in there, right? Especially this year. So how do they change their defensive philosophy? Do they play man and they press and they say, hey, we're going to keep a spy in the box, or we're going to rob her, or we're going to play one hole and use a spy on him, and our secondary's better than what your receivers are, and then when that plan falls apart, so like I think a team which like Michigan, I think is a big bruising team playing Big Ten football. I think that matches up well with what Alabama does, right? Like what they're used to. I think they struggle in the past, especially against teams that are firepower from the passing game standpoint. And I think a team like Washington from an offense versus Bama's defense could have been a struggle just because they can spread them out and throw the ball all over the place. And then Texas beat them earlier in the year doing that same thing. So from a matchup standpoint, I think this is by far the best matchup for Alabama.
Yeah, I think the one thing that Michigan can't do is let Jalen Milroe sit back there all day long extending plays, because Michigan's secondary to me is really good, right? I think it's one of the best in the country. But the idea that you could have a quarterback extend plays is an equalizer for me, because dudes just can't cover for all that long. It's got to be a contained rush. I think it's got to be even a little bit of blitz when you pick your moments here. But if Jalen Milroe's out there and he's playing that backyard football and we know he's great at the deep ball, that's going to be the dagger in the game.
You know, Max Duggan, TCU's quarterback, isn't Jalen Milroe, but Max Duggan was willing and able to use his legs, and it hurt Michigan at times last year. I do believe that the whole experience of TCU will benefit Michigan. And really what you're asking is, can Michigan do more than one thing to stop opponents? And you can go back and watch the way they faced Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State and how exotic they got with their coverages and how disciplined they were at times. I do think they're going to have a game plan in place to contain Jalen Milroe, and I do think they have the experience and the talent to go execute that game plan. They will need to be at their best for 4 quarters.
It's not the coverage plan in this one. It's got to be the pass rush plan.
But I'm saying just being able to do multiple things.
I get what you're saying, but they got to make sure that is the emphasis.
Yeah, we're going to have a month-long discussion. Michigan, Alabama, all the way leading up to the playoffs game. So thank you, Josh and Jake. Really appreciate the insight. But it's time to get into some Heisman Trophy talk here with, of course, I got to believe the Heisman favorite, Jaden Daniels from LSU. We're getting into the conversation here. Bo Nix, Michael Penix. And Marvin Harrison, why is Marvin Harrison now that the red quarter, blue quarter's gone? I could bash the Big Ten. I don't understand why in the world Marvin Harrison is here and Jalen Milroe isn't. AJ, what's your thoughts on Jalen Milroe? Without him, Alabama doesn't sniff the college football playoff. What's your thoughts on these finalists?
Yeah, and listen, I think the list is fine. I mean, you always have one guy in there that's going to be a big name guy, but especially the last 2 seasons, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been unreal. He's just a special player. He's a guy that you have to scheme around. You have to double cover it. You have to sometimes triple cover, and I have no problem with him being in there. I think it's Jaden Daniels' trophy now for sure. I thought Bo Nix had a very high chance of winning the Heisman if they beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship. I mean, he was 37 touchdowns to 2 interceptions going in that game, and one of the interceptions earlier in the year was off of his receiver. I mean, straight through his hands, hit his helmet up in the air, and got tipped that way and picked. So I think for sure now Jaden Daniels will be the Heisman winner.
Well, you said something very interesting there, and I'm glad you did, because Jaden Daniels didn't play during conference championship weekend because his team obviously didn't get there. Bo Nix did. He had a so-so performance, as you alluded to, and that may have cost him the Heisman Trophy. Do you think it's fair that, it's really these big game moments where we judge these guys? Had Bo Nix had a 5-6 touchdown game and Oregon won, we're probably giving him the Heisman, whereas Jaden Daniels essentially got a bye, and now we're giving it to him. Not that I disagree with you. I think Jaden Daniels should be the winner, but do you like the fact that we put so much emphasis on these key matchups like a conference championship weekend? Gotcha. Well, because to me, I thought this was a season award. And again, Jaden Daniels' team, what did he do against Bama? I don't know. I'm not a big fan of putting so much emphasis on the conference championship weekend. A weekend Jaden Daniels didn't even play in. But hey, we got a lot more here on Rivals Down South coming up. I really wanted to talk with AJ about Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, and the battle there of who is the best coach in college football. Have the narratives changed over the weekend? I don't know. All right, welcome back in. Rivals down south. Big topic of conversation here. Not just the SEC, but in all the country, AJ. Nick Saban, Kirby Smart. Kirby had all the momentum. Dynasty in the build. I was calling it the decaying dynasty with Alabama. Now I look like a decaying idiot here. Kirby Smart, Nick Saban. We know who's the greatest of all time, but who's the greatest coach in college football today as we sit here, AJ?
Well, listen, I mean, I don't know. I hate getting into that. Like, I think they're both great coaches. I mean, they both, I think the thing you admire about Coach Saban, right, is him being able to evolve over time. This is not the same Coach Saban that I had in 2009 when I came in as a freshman, right? Like, he was extremely hard on guys. Like, we practiced full pads all the time. It was just a different mindset during that time. And he's been able to change during the times, right? But he's still getting the best players in the country. And he does a great job of getting the coaches, because he has a year-to-year change in his coaching staff. And you got to applaud him for that too, is being able to get the coaches to buy in and really buy into his system within that 1 year. And that's special. And then Kirby's taken the old Saban style and taken it to Georgia and just ran with it. And it's worked out tremendously for him. It's funny though, like, David Pollock's comments last week talking about that Kirby Smart's just a better coach and he has a better staff. I mean, I felt like he was definitely being biased where he played and everything. But listen, they're both great coaches. They both have great staffs. But there's a reason Georgia is 0-4 versus Alabama in the SEC championship, and Saban's 16-0 in Atlanta.
Yeah, and you hit on something important there, AJ, that really piqued my interest here. Maybe these guys we're not taking away anything from them. Saban's the greatest of all time. Kirby's top 2 in the country right now. I mean, God forbid he's not number 1. But how the importance of when all this change occurs, nailing the assistant coaches and particularly the coordinators. Nick Saban had to mix things up after you left. Had hired Lane Kiffin, that a lot of people thought that'd be a disaster. And that was nothing but success. Sarkisian follows after that, makes the changes in the offseason here, and that's led to this run. And now you could say similar things about Kirby. I mean, they panned Mike Bobo when he hired him. This season went so well. Bobo was up for National Coach of the Year. Now, following one single loss to Alabama, fans are wondering, well, how long is Nick Saban, or should be Kirby Smart, going to stick with his buddy Bobo here? He's holding us back. How important is it? Are these assistant coaching hires to what we think of these head coaches, which gets lost in the conversation?
A ton, yeah. I mean, listen, because if from a Coach Saban standpoint, and Alabama standpoint, the hiring of Tommy Rees was questionable in a lot of people's eyes, right? Like, I mean, even myself going into the year, it's like, well, all right, he was offensive coordinator at Notre Dame 1 year. Notre Dame's offense that year was atrocious, right? And I felt like, man, this could have been a little bit of reach. And it started out a struggle at Bama for him, especially playing Texas the second game of the year. Like, his play calling during that game is completely different now, the way he calls games for Jalen Milroe. So I think he realized, like, I have to mix in some RPOs. I have to mix in some zone reads. Like, this guy has to use his legs. He's not a drop back passing quarterback. He's just not. Like, I understand. I love Jalen's confidence, and hey, I'm a pocket quarterback. Like, I look to pass first. Like, well, yeah, every quarterback looks to pass first, but if that first read isn't there, like, you better take off and run when you have your legs. And in the college game, you can do that. So, and for Georgia fans, if they're wanting to fire Mike Bobo, like, listen, they had one bad game where they cost themselves. Like, they had the momentum, or especially early in the game. I thought their defense played well, especially in the second half. I mean, going into the fourth quarter, I think Bama had like 20-something yards of total offense. I thought their defense played well enough. And for whatever reason, I thought Georgia's passing game would be a little more successful in the SEC championship. I thought they would find ways to use Brock a little bit more, but I know Brock was hurting. McConkey was hurt. I mean, he looked bad with his ankle the whole time. So I know you had some key guys that were down and not 100%, but Georgia still, and you could argue, a lot of people could argue that Georgia's still one of the top 4 teams in the country.
Well, I really wanted to ask you this, AJ. A lot of people saying Nick Saban, clearly a different coach. He's a gentler, kinder man. He said Miss Terry had to get on him to jump on some players this season. And, putting all that aside, because he clearly still has passion. He's still at the top of his game. But you throw in NIL, you throw in the transfer portal, all this uncertainty in the college football landscape. If this Alabama team wins it all, could you see Nick Saban saying, what am I doing this for, chasing this, when I got people like Kirby nipping at my heels year in, year out for the foreseeable future?
Well, 100%. Listen, I mean, it's no secret. I mean, Coach is getting older. He's not getting younger. What else does he have to accomplish to try to prove anything? It's really going to come down to, does he want to just keep up with the grind, right? Does he want to be in there watching film, or does he want to go spend time with his grandkids? A lot of people in his inner circle, and I hear from other people, he spent $17.5 million on a mansion down in Jupiter, Florida, right? Like, a lot of he's got car dealerships down there that he's bought into. So a lot of his stuff is, you could see it's starting to lean towards getting ready for retirement and going down there and enjoying that lifestyle. But you never know with Coach. Like, Coach is a competitor, so I mean, he might feel that way sometimes, but he could wake up the next morning and be right back to his normal self. So, but yes, I wouldn't be shocked if this was his last year as well.
Yeah, can't wait to find out. But I also can't wait to find out who disappoints their fan base most in this bowl season. We're going to talk some SEC coaches. Who needs a win most during bowl season? And it sure isn't Nick Saban. Welcome back in. Rivals Down South. It's the best time of the year. AJ, holidays right around the corner, bowl season, and I hear it. I hear it all the time from these fans, AJ. The bowl games don't matter, besides from obviously the playoff. You know, they're over and done with it. But I'll tell you what, AJ, you lose a bowl game and your fans have got to deal with that for the next 7 months, and they are not going to let these coaches off the hook for losing a game. So there's a couple coaches here, AJ, that I thought, you know, of these SEC teams really need a win here to keep the fans off them. And I'd love to put Billy Napier on this list, but he didn't make a bowl game, so he's not on here. Mark Stoops, Kentucky versus Clemson. I think he's firmly there after all the Texas A&M shenanigans. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss versus Penn State. He can't win a big game. This would go a long way to killing that narrative. Hugh Freeze, after the Iron Bowl, shoulda, coulda, woulda against Maryland. Josh Heupel, 8-4 now is a disappointment after winning 11 last year. Tennessee versus Iowa. Which of those four, AJ, unless you got someone else in mind, which one of them do you think needs a win the most to appease the fans this offseason?
Yeah, listen, like you said, you know, the Mark Stoops, I think Kentucky needs Mark Stoops more than Mark Stoops needs Kentucky. So I don't know if that win matters, whether, you know, he wins or loses. You know, everything we'd heard, he had taken the Texas A&M job and agreed on that before something happened with the booster club and it fell apart. But for me, the coach that needs the biggest win or needs this win the most is Lane Kiffin. And I think it's one from a recruiting standpoint, his whole come to the SIP, party in the SIP, like come be a part of this deal. Because you got to have one of these big wins. And you haven't had a big win all year. You struggled against Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl last game of the year. Like, even though I don't think Penn State's a great team by any means, but you specialize in throwing the ball, like spread them out, use your speed, and take advantage of this. Because in the end, in people's eyes, this will be a big win for the program, and winning the Peach Bowl will be big for him moving forward. So I would say this is a must-win for Lane, just to keep his hype train going and people loving him.
Yeah, I'll stop calling him Lane Whiffen if he wins this game. I promise, AJ. I'll go with Mark Stoops. I'll tell you why. But I do want to say Josh Heupel, I think he desperately 8-5 after that 11-2 season. A lot of people are going to be questioning whether he was a one-hit wonder, whether he's really the man to lead Tennessee to that mountaintop. But I think it's Mark Stoops because of all the A&M shenanigans. Like you said, if it was up to him, he'd probably be the coach right now in College Station. So he's got some winning the fan base back. Second half of the season was a complete dud, losing to god-awful South Carolina. How in the world did that happen? The only big win he got this year was against Louisville, that I don't think any SEC fan respects, beating an ACC, and neither do we on Rivals Down South.